Did you know that one of the world's safest nations, a country long admired for its peace and stability, once topped Europe in asylum seekers per capita within a single year? In the year 2015, Sweden opened its borders and welcomed around 163,000 asylum seekers, mostly from Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. That figure made Sweden the European leader in asylum applications relative to population. Within just over a decade, beginning around 2010, the share of foreign-born residents in Sweden surged from roughly 14% to more than 20% of the population by 2023. Migration itself isn't new to Sweden. The country has accepted waves of newcomers since the end of the Second World War. But the sheer pace of change in the last 30 years has pushed the nation into uncharted territory. And in recent years, public opinion has turned sharply. The Nordic nation, once synonymous with safety and social harmony, is now making headlines for something else being among the European countries with one of the highest rates of gun-related deaths. Since the year 2023, Sweden has made a dramatic turn in its immigration policy. Instead of focusing on integrating refugees, the country has begun tightening residency rules and actively increasing the number of people sent back to their home countries. Recent surveys show just how divided Swedish society has become on this issue. According to a 2022 study by Hearts and Minds, only 47% of Swedes believe that immigrants make the country a better place to live, a clear drop from the years before 2018. At the same time, a 2024 report from the Nordic Welfare Center found that 4 in 10 immigrants in Sweden say they do not feel like part of Swedish society. These figures paint a sobering picture. Integration remains a challenge. Data from the Swedish migration agency Migrationsverket confirms the shift. Between 2023 and 2024, the number of revoked residence permits rose sharply, particularly after the new immigration laws came into force. Officials say they are now reviewing residency cases more closely and prioritizing the repatriation of those who no longer qualify for asylum. The revised Immigration Act, which took effect at the end of 2023, also imposed much stricter rules on family reunification. Refugees and asylum seekers must now prove a stable income and adequate housing, and the minimum age for sponsoring relatives has been raised. The Swedish government defends these measures as necessary to protect the welfare system and encourage financial independence. But human rights organizations argue otherwise, calling them violations of the fundamental right to family unity. These changes have sparked intense controversy both inside and outside the country. Groups like Amnesty International and the UN Refugee Agency warn that restricting family reunification and residency could endanger refugees' safety and breach Sweden's international commitments. The government, however, insists that the new approach is about restoring order and easing the burden on the welfare system. To many outside observers, Sweden's tightening of immigration rules might seem paradoxical, even backwards. After all, this is a nation long seen as a symbol of freedom, welfare, and tolerance. But amid soaring welfare costs and the rise of organized crime, the government has begun shifting from what it once called humanitarian openness toward a new era of pragmatic control. In recent years, Sweden has faced a surge in gang-related violence. A large portion of those suspected were either immigrants or individuals raised in heavily migrant suburbs. This wave of violence has reshaped Swedish politics. It fueled the rise of the right-wing Sweden Democrats, a party that has long campaigned to end open-door immigration. In the 2022 general election, they won over 20% of the national vote, becoming the second largest party and a key coalition partner in the current center-right government. And so the question remains, how did a nation once celebrated as a model of integration find itself entering what many now call an age of immigration introspection? Is this the moment when Europe as a whole begins moving toward a conditional model of migration, where compassion must now share space with calculations of economics and security? Sweden, once the gold standard for Nordic safety and stability, now finds itself living a paradox. Its per capita income has surpassed $58,000 a year, ranking among the highest in the world, yet the feeling of safety among its citizens has fallen to historic lows. For decades, Sweden was synonymous with peace, order, and neutrality, a society where violent crime was rare and trust in institutions ran deep. But since the refugee wave of 2015, that image has been slowly eroding. According to the Swedish National Police, the year 2023 recorded 390 shootings, leaving 53 people dead, the highest figure in the country's modern history. Measured by population, that equals about 4 gun deaths per million inhabitants, more than twice the European average of roughly 1.5. In other words, the risk of being shot to death in Sweden is now over 2 times higher than in most of Western Europe. Most of these incidents are linked to organized gang violence, concentrated in immigrant-dense suburbs such as Rinkeby in Stockholm, Angered in Gothenburg, and Rosengård in Malmö. A government report also revealed that foreign-born individuals are 2.5 times more likely to be registered as criminal suspects than native-born Swedes. Even after adjusting for age, gender, and socioeconomic status, the risk remains about 1.8 times higher. And perhaps most troubling, the second generation those born in Sweden to immigrant parents are still 1.6 times more likely to appear in criminal records. Data from BRO also shows that gun-related gang violence has risen by more than 200% since 2012, with both perpetrators and victims largely coming from immigrant backgrounds or families with roots outside Sweden. Experts say the roots of this crisis lie in deep social and economic fractures. Low income, high unemployment, and the concentration of migrant populations in impoverished suburbs that have become cut off from mainstream society. In the past, Sweden dispersed newcomers across the country, allowing for slow but steady integration. But the refugee wave of 2015 pushed the welfare and integration systems to their breaking point. As reception centers and temporary housing overflowed, tens of thousands ended up settling long-term in struggling neighborhoods like Rinkeby, Rosengård, and Angered, places where job opportunities, language learning, and social connection were nearly frozen. According to the latest OECD data from 2023, immigrants in Sweden, especially those from outside the European Union, continue to face deep income and poverty gaps compared to native Swedes. Nearly 45% of non-EU immigrants across the European Union are considered at risk of poverty or social exclusion. While that figure for EU citizens is around 27%, in Sweden, the divide is even starker. The unemployment rate among foreign-born residents stands at roughly 19%, almost 3 times higher than the 6 to 7% recorded among native-born citizens. This economic gap doesn't just affect living standards. It has created a growing social divide. The city of Malmö illustrates this divide more vividly than anywhere else. Once celebrated as a beacon of humanitarian policy, welcoming thousands of refugees each day at the height of the crisis in late 2015, Malmö has since become one of Sweden's epicenters of organized crime. By 2023, 1/3 of its more than 350,000 residents had been born outside Sweden, representing over 170 different nationalities. According to Swedish police, many of the recent shootings and bombings in the city have been linked to criminal networks originating from this neighborhood. Former Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson once warned, "Segregation has gone too far to the point where we are living in the same country, but in 2 completely different realities." Malmö has become the clearest embodiment of this parallel society, a place where economic inequality, cultural distance, and crime converge to expose the cracks in the Nordic welfare model. While the economy is not the only reason Swedes have turned against immigration, it remains one of the most explosive. A 2023 study by the Delmi Policy Institute found that public trust in Sweden's welfare system is fading, as many citizens believe high taxes are increasingly used to support immigrants rather than native Swedes. Sweden's welfare state, built after the Second World War and reaching its peak in the 1970s, was founded on a simple ideal: everyone contributes, everyone benefits. But in recent years, that balance has started to shift. Immigrants, especially refugees, tend to have lower incomes and higher unemployment rates, making them more dependent on social support. According to Statistics Sweden, SCB, the average income of foreign-born residents is only about 77% of that of native Swedes. For those coming from Asia or Africa, the figure drops further to between 63 and 68%. The unemployment rate among foreign-born workers still hovers between 14 and 16% more than triple the rate for natives, which remains around 4 to 5%. Facing a growing wave of anti-immigration sentiment, the Swedish government has turned to its toughest immigration crackdown in decades. Asylum rules have been sharply narrowed, and those whose applications are denied are now required to return to their home countries as quickly as possible. In the second quarter of 2024 alone, Sweden carried out roughly 3,185 deportations to destinations outside the European Union, one of the highest figures in the region. At the same time, authorities have expanded the scope of residence permit revocations and introduced electronic monitoring in temporary housing facilities while individuals await repatriation. Yet Sweden has not completely shut its doors. Officials acknowledge that immigration remains essential to the country's workforce, but the priorities have changed dramatically. The nation has shifted from humanitarian openness to selective competence. Under the new labor law that took effect on the 1st of November 2023, work permits are now issued only to applicants earning at least 80% of the national median wage. Meanwhile, Sweden's refugee resettlement program has been drastically reduced from 5,000 people in 2022 to fewer than 1,000 per year in 2023 and 2024, the minimum required under EU law. These reforms have turned Sweden into one of Europe's most restrictive immigration regimes. Despite ongoing shortages of skilled labor, the government remains firm in its position. Immigration must serve economic growth, not strain the welfare state. Across the Nordic region, this marks a deeper transformation. The welfare model that once made Scandinavia a haven for refugees is redefining itself. Denmark moved first, adopting a zero asylum policy years ago, and now Sweden has officially followed. It leaves Europe confronting a larger question. Is the compassion that once defined its identity quietly giving way to a new, more pragmatic age of immigration?